I stood before my father's grave, reflecting on the legacy he had left behind. He had been the CEO of a successful company, but after his passing, my brother-in-law Patrick assumed control. Along with the company, he inherited an astonishing $500 million, while all I received was an old mini truck. Patrick, reveling in his newfound fortune, sneered, "The company and estate are all mine now. That little truck suits you perfectly." Yet, that truck wasn't just an ordinary vehicle to me. As I examined it closely, I felt a sense of purpose. When I turned on the ignition, I noticed a peculiar detail, a preset destination displayed on the navigation system. "What's this about?" I thought. Determined, I gripped the wheel and started driving. 041 Hello, my name is Frank. I'm 45 years old, and today I find myself standing beside a coffin, saying goodbye to my father. My relationship with him had always been complex. He had built a thriving construction business from nothing, yet I chose a different path for my life. Fresh out of university, I decided to become a teacher, pursuing a dream I'd held onto since childhood. This choice caused frequent conflicts between us, and over time, we grew distant. Although we didn't see eye to eye, I never resented my father. I simply wanted to carve my own path and couldn't abandon my aspirations to manage the family company, even though I felt a duty to do so as the eldest son. The weight of not living up to his expectations lingered over me, keeping me from visiting my family home. My mother often relied on my sister, Sophia, to share updates about my life with my father. Sophia and her husband Patrick would send extravagant gifts or arrange elaborate celebrations for my father's birthday, pretending they were from me. Sophia would urge me gently, saying, "I wish you and Dad could speak directly. He's just putting up a strong front, but I know deep down he misses you." I often dismissed her words, shaking my head with guilt and regret. But one day, I received devastating news. My father had been diagnosed with cancer. The moment I heard this, I resigned from my job and returned to my hometown. For the first time, I realized that life itself was precious, and the arguments that once felt so important were now meaningless. I resolved to teach at a local school and care for my ailing father. My father was taken aback by my sudden return, but in time, he accepted my presence in silence. I didn't say much either, preferring to let my actions speak. I remained by his side, assisting him with whatever he needed, and his occasional quiet words of gratitude brought me some comfort. Unfortunately, his battle with illness ended sooner than we had hoped. As his life quietly came to a close, my sister Sophia, my mother, and I stayed by his side until his final moments. While we could never know what thoughts crossed his mind as he departed, we held on to the hope that he found peace. Losing him, even though we knew it was coming, was a heavy blow. My mother, Sophia, and even my young nephew Randy were deeply affected, shedding tears for him. The only person who seemed indifferent was Patrick. As we prepared for the funeral, Patrick made a cold remark, "So, he's gone for good now." Hearing this, I was proud of my ability to stay calm. Instead of reacting, I threw myself into organizing the funeral, keeping my emotions in check by focusing on the tasks at hand. Patrick and I had never been on good terms, and his words only added to the tension. However, I didn't let that distract me from honoring my father properly. I first met Patrick when he worked as a skilled technician in my father's company. I admired his expertise and thought of him as an older brother when he married Sophia. Back then, Patrick seemed like a trustworthy mentor. Before their marriage, I often sought his advice on various challenges I faced, and he always gave thoughtful responses. One pivotal conversation was about whether I should join the family business. Patrick encouraged me, saying, "Frank, you should live your life on your terms. Nobody can guarantee which decisions are right or wrong, but it's crucial to choose the ones you won't regret." Taking his advice to heart, I switched from business studies to education, following my passion for teaching. Over 2 decades passed, and my relationship with my father became even more strained. I focused on my own life, never closing the gap between us. But when I learned about his illness, I left everything behind and rushed back home. The Patrick I returned to, however, wasn't the same man. Once welcoming and warm, he now seemed uneasy in my presence. When we were alone, he spoke sharply. "So, you ran back when you heard he was sick. Let me save you some trouble. You won't get anything," Patrick sneered. His accusation stunned me.
"What do you mean by that?"
I asked. "Don't pretend you don't know. Even if you've had a sudden change of heart and want to run the company, it's already decided who will take over," he replied, his tone biting. I protested. "That's not why I came back. I wanted to make things right with Dad before it was too late." But Patrick wasn't interested in listening. "Your excuses sound like something from a soap opera. But don't bother. You missed your chance. Go back to your life and leave the company to me." From that day on, Patrick's attitude toward me became openly hostile. He ridiculed me at every opportunity. "No matter what you try, it's over. You'll never win him over now. Just go back to your classroom and deal with your troubled students," he would mock. At first, his words stung. I spent hours reflecting on how others might perceive me and whether I had made the right choices in life. But as time went on, I realized Patrick's comments weren't about me. They were about him. He was obsessed with his own interests, showing little concern for my father's declining health. Over time, I began to suspect Patrick's motives for marrying Sophia had more to do with his ambitions for the company than love. He rarely visited my father during his illness and took no part in caregiving. Instead, he busied himself with plans for the business, claiming it was all for his son's future. Patrick liked to boast about preparing his son for greatness, yet left all the parenting and household chores to Sophia. Whenever she expressed frustration, Patrick would dramatically take her hands and declare, "Everything I'm doing is for our family's future. We just need to endure this hardship together." Sophia, though hesitant, often gave in to his persuasive words. Patrick was skilled at presenting himself as the ideal husband, and Sophia wanted to believe in him. To me, however, Patrick showed his true colors, perhaps thinking I was no different from him. Despite my growing resentment, I endured his provocations. But when my father passed away, leaving Patrick with the bulk of the inheritance, I was devastated. Patrick, who had waited for this moment, now owned most of the company's shares and received a vast fortune. Sophia and I, on the other hand, were left with scraps. My inheritance? An old mini truck that my father had cherished. In public, Patrick feigned surprise at the reading of the will. But when we were alone, he couldn't hide his glee. "So, you took care of him day and night, thinking it would change his mind. And all you get is this rust bucket," he said, laughing. "The company is mine now, and you're left with a joke of an inheritance. How fitting." Clutching the truck's keys, I felt a mix of anger and despair. The truck, once my father's favorite vehicle, was now a symbol of everything I had lost. My family tried to console me. "Dad always loved that truck. It was special to him. He must have had his reasons for leaving it to you," they said, hoping to lift my spirits. But their words couldn't soothe the ache in my heart. Patrick's behavior made it impossible to ignore the injustice of the situation. It wasn't about the money. I cared little for wealth. It was the insult of seeing my father's legacy fall into the hands of someone who showed him no respect. Hoping to distract myself, I decided to clean the truck. I carefully washed it, trying to make sense of my feelings. When I finally sat in the driver's seat and started the engine, something caught my attention. The navigation system was a blank. It displayed a preset destination. "That's strange," I muttered. "Why is there a route already entered?" The system showed only coordinates, with no indication of the destination's identity. The drive would take about an hour. Curiosity overtook me. I shifted the truck into gear and followed the path laid out on the screen. The drive brought me to an unexpected place, a small, modest house far from the large estates I'd grown accustomed to in my hometown. The simplicity of the home exuded a quiet warmth. I stepped out of the truck, feeling a mix of confusion and anticipation. The house seemed ordinary, but something about it felt purposeful, as if it held answers I hadn't yet uncovered. After a moment of hesitation, I rang the doorbell. To my astonishment, my mother opened the door. "I've been waiting for you, Frank," she said softly. "Come in." "Mom? What are you doing here?" And how did this place end up in Dad's truck's navigation system? I asked, bewildered. I'll explain everything, she assured me. First, come inside and have some tea. Inside, the home was cozy but unadorned, with only the essentials. My mother's demeanor was calm, almost as if she had been preparing for this moment. As she poured the tea, she began to explain. This house was your father's secret retreat. He called it his hideout. We'd come here when we needed space to think or wanted a peaceful moment away from everything. A hideout? I asked, surprised. I never heard about this before. She nodded. It was a special place for us, a sanctuary. If we ever argued, we'd come here to cool off and reflect. Your father always found comfort here. She then handed me a brown envelope, slightly bulging at the edges. Your father left this for you. It's important. I opened the envelope to find a heartfelt letter. As I read, emotions overwhelmed me. In the letter, my father admitted to his mistakes, apologizing for the distance he had allowed to grow between us. He thanked me for coming back and standing by him during his final days, expressing a gratitude he had struggled to show in life. You chose your own path, and I respect that, he wrote. Although I may not have shown it, I was proud of you. He also wrote of Patrick, admitting that he had grown wary of his true intentions. Patrick may seem charming, but his actions speak otherwise. I left the majority of the company to him, but not because I trust him. I've set aside resources with your mother to ensure you and Sophia have what you need. Use them wisely. The letter left me speechless. My father, who I had thought never understood me, had been paying attention all along. My mother handed me an account book, confirming the substantial funds he had left. Your father trusted me to safeguard this money. It was meant to stay hidden from Patrick's grasp. Now, I want you and Sophia to have it. Tears filled my eyes. For the first time, I felt truly seen by my father. My mother explained carefully, your father knew Patrick would try to take everything. That's why he entrusted me with these funds while he was still alive. He wanted to ensure they wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. If I transfer the money directly to you or Sophia, it might be contested under tax laws or even attract Patrick's attention. But now I want you both to have it as a living gift. She handed me an account book that detailed the amount my father had saved, a figure far beyond anything I had imagined. It wasn't just the money that moved me, but the realization of how deeply my father cared for us. I had spent so much of my life believing he didn't understand me, but the letter and this gesture proved otherwise. His legacy wasn't just the company, it was the care and thoughtfulness he had put into protecting our family. Overcome with emotion, I looked at my mother and said, I only wish I could have done more for Dad while he was here. She gave me a reassuring smile. We all feel that way when we lose someone we love. But you gave him peace in his final days. He knew you loved him, and that's all that mattered to him. Her words brought tears to my eyes, but they also strengthened my resolve. I decided then and there that I wouldn't let Patrick destroy the company my father had worked so hard to build. Quietly, I began to make plans. My first step was to reach out to the senior executives who had been loyal to my father. Many of them had been pushed aside or dismissed by Patrick's arrogance, but they still cared deeply for the company. When I shared my vision of restoring my father's legacy, they immediately pledged their support. At home, my mother and Sophia kept Patrick distracted. They acted as if nothing had changed, allowing him to believe he had succeeded in seizing full control. Patrick grew more confident and careless, taunting me at every opportunity. You've got nothing now. No father, no company, not even a real inheritance. You might as well leave, he jeered one evening. I refused to respond to his insults, knowing that patience was my greatest weapon. Meanwhile, Patrick's mismanagement was wreaking havoc on the company. He ignored critical responsibilities, drove away talented employees, and made rash decisions without consulting anyone. His arrogance alienated the remaining staff, and the company's performance began to plummet. Patrick, however, seemed oblivious to the damage. He spent extravagantly, playing golf under the guise of business, and indulging in a lavish lifestyle. His behavior was a far cry from the hardworking man I had once respected. Seeing the impact of his leadership, or lack thereof, only strengthened my determination to act. The day finally arrived. Early in the morning, I went to the office and positioned myself in the president's chair, waiting for Patrick to arrive. When he walked in and saw me sitting there, his face turned red with fury. "What are you doing here? Get out of my office," he bellowed. I remained calm. "Actually, Patrick, this isn't your office anymore. As of today, you've been removed as president." "What nonsense are you spouting? I'm in charge here," he shouted, trying to maintain his composure. I explained the situation. With the funds my father had left, I had purchased a majority of the company's shares and secured the support of the board of directors. An extraordinary shareholders' meeting had been held, and Patrick's dismissal was official. "You're no longer the president of this company, Patrick," I said firmly. His face turned pale. You can't do this. I'll take you to court," he stammered. "Feel free," I replied evenly. "But you'll find that every step we've taken is perfectly legal. You've been removed for misconduct, and we have plenty of evidence to back it up." Patrick grew defensive. "What misconduct? You're just jealous and trying to steal the company from me." I met his gaze and asked, "Patrick, have you been using company assets for personal gain? Diverting funds, signing questionable contracts? Does any of that sound familiar?" Patrick froze. "How do you know about that?" he asked, his voice shaking. I detailed the evidence we had gathered. Office equipment he had taken home, funds he had spent on personal luxuries, and contracts that benefited only him. "You thought no one was watching, but you were wrong," I said. Cornered, Patrick tried to deflect blame. "So, what if I used a few company resources? Everyone does it," he argued. "That might fly elsewhere, but not here," I countered. "This company is more than just a business. It's my father's legacy, and I won't let you tarnish it any further." Patrick tried to bluster his way out, but the evidence was irrefutable. His dismissal was final. That same evening, Sophia confronted Patrick at home with divorce papers in hand. "You only cared about the company, not our family," she told him, her voice steady. "You've ignored your responsibilities as a husband and father, and I'm done enabling you." Patrick, desperate, tried to plead with her, but Sophia had made up her mind. With the financial security our father had left us, she knew she could build a better future for her children without Patrick. As for Patrick, his troubles didn't end there. Shortly after losing the company and his marriage, he became the victim of a financial scam. Lured by a fraudulent investment scheme, Patrick lost nearly everything he had left. Meanwhile, I found a sense of peace in my simpler life. I continued teaching, spending time with my mother and nephew, Randy. Randy, always full of energy and curiosity, declared one day, "I'm going to be a president like Grandpa when I grow up." His innocent ambition made us all laugh. "You might change your mind when you're older," I teased. He frowned thoughtfully. "Maybe, but I'd better study harder if I want to be like Grandpa or you." His earnestness filled the room with warmth, reminding us of what truly mattered: family, love, and the legacy we carried forward together.